Welcome to the first of MASSP's two-part back-to-school legislative update. In this screencast, I'll be reviewing where things stand going into the 2019-20 school year with regard to the K-12 budget. In the second half of this series, I'll recap any new laws taking effect this year that you'll want to be aware of and preview what could be on the horizon for the fall and winter legislative sessions. For those who don't know me, my name is Bob Kefgen. I'm MASSP's Director of Government Relations. If you have any questions about anything you hear today or any other legislative questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. We're starting our screencast series with the budget because that is the single largest outstanding issue in Lansing right now. Before I get into the details, I want to start with some context that matters for understanding the ongoing debate. This is a look at the state's general fund revenue for the last 20 years. As you can see, the state's general fund general purpose revenue is the same today in actual dollars, not inflation-adjusted dollars, as it was 20 years ago. When you adjust that for inflation, that means the general fund has $5.6 billion less purchasing power today than it did 20 years ago. In other words, the state's general fund has been shrinking steadily for the past 20 years. In contrast, the school aid fund has been comparatively healthy, so we've ended up playing a shell game. Full disclosure, I did lift this graphic from Governor Whitmer's budget presentation, but it's a good illustration of why I'm going to be talking about gas taxes during an education update. Right now, we take money out of the school aid fund to shore up general fund programs, especially higher education. And then we take general fund that should be spent on those programs to spend on roads. And we're not talking about a small amount of money. In total, we shift about $1.2 billion out of the school aid fund to subsidize general fund spending. About $1 billion of that is a direct shift to the higher education and community colleges budgets. But we've also been transferring general fund programs into the school aid budget for years. We have over $150 million in general fund programs that are paid out of the school aid fund. Things like school bus inspections that used to be a service provided and paid for by the state police out of their budget, but which now reside in the school aid budget. And so, this year's entire budget debate, including the school budget, hinges on road funding. Governor Whitmer's initial proposal was a 45-cent gas tax. Her proposal raises $2.5 billion total, but note that that's only $1.9 billion in new roads money since we're currently spending about $600 million in general fund on the roads. I frequently get asked about alternatives, and there are lots of them. This chart lays out what some of those look like. If you have a chance to hear Governor Whitmer talk about this, she said she's open to other proposals, but wants to raise $2.5 billion total because that's the estimated cost of repairing and maintaining Michigan's roads above and beyond what we spend now. One other alternative I do want to highlight is tax expenditures, also known as tax credits. As a state, we forego about $40 billion in taxes that we could collect but don't. This includes things like a sales tax on services, which could raise about $13 billion if we decided to tax all services. But although there are plenty of options for raising tax revenue, neither the House or Senate is talking about tax increases. Instead, the House is talking about diverting sales tax revenue on gasoline to pay for roads. And it makes a great talking point to say that every penny you pay at the pump should go to fix roads. And, in truth, it doesn't, since the sales tax you pay on gas is distributed just like all the other sales tax. But that also means that shifting the money to pay for roads will take money away from schools and local governments and leave a pothole in the budget that has to be filled somehow. The Senate hasn't yet put forward a formal road funding plan, but what we are hearing lots of talk about is bonding the MIPSR's unfunded liability. Basically, think of it like refinancing your mortgage, not to lower your interest rate, but to lower your monthly payment. If you only have 20 years left on your mortgage and you refinance into another 30-year mortgage, your monthly payment will go down. That would free up cash flow you could use to pay other bills. Or in this case, it would free up money you could invest in the stock market, which is the rest of what we're hearing the Senate is going to propose. Invest in the stock market and bank on the returns on the investment exceeding the interest on the bond, so you come out ahead and have money to use to fix the roads. We know that right now the Senate and the House are negotiating amongst themselves. We do not know what sort of proposal they will come out with, but our best guess is they'll put forward a hybrid of their two plans. In other words, use the House proposal to divert money from schools to pave the roads, then mortgage MIPSers and invest in the stock market and hope the investment returns are enough to cover the payments and backfill schools. So where are we going from here? Well, there's very little we know at this point about how the budget battle is going to play out. The school fiscal year started on July 1, so districts already have budgets in place based on whatever best guess they've been able to make. The state fiscal year doesn't start until October 1, which is the deadline to avoid a government shutdown. But until the House and Senate put forward a proposal and we see Governor Whitmer's reaction, we don't have a good idea how this is going to play out. At this point, the best thing schools can do is look at the 3 school budget proposals that were put forward as a guide, albeit an imperfect one. You can see the different proposals' impact on foundation here, but what I want to point out especially are the last 2 lines. The governor is spending way more than everyone else because her proposal comes up with a defined source of new revenue. The tax increase is what makes this possible. But even with $2.5 billion in new revenue, note also that the governor's proposal still calls for $400 million of school aid fund money to go to community colleges. It's still by far the best proposal on the table, and the weighted foundation is a big deal, but it's only a step. There is, however, one thing that seems likely to come out of the budgets, so I'm going to end with this. All 3 budgets have language that would allow professional development to count as both hours and days of instructional time. There are some rules around it to make sure that if you're swapping instruction for professional development, that the PD is going to be of quality. And there are some limits. For example, there is language that would require the professional development to be spread throughout the year. But this would bring back some flexibility that districts haven't had in a long time. And it would allow you to count full-day professional development as an instructional day for the first time. Given the delays in adopting a budget, districts probably won't be able to utilize much of this flexibility in the coming school year, but it is something to plan ahead for. That's it for the first half of MASSP's Back to School screencast series. Check back next week for the second half when I'll recap any new laws taking effect this year that you'll want to be aware of and preview what could be on the horizon for the fall and winter legislative session. In the meantime, if you have any questions about anything you've heard today or any other legislative questions, please don't hesitate to contact me.